Nigeria's food security issue is no longer news, and it's even worsened with the level of insecurity, seeing the killings that have taken place in states that are supposed to be the core producers of food in the country. So how now can we expand the team of food producers in Nigeria? Let's have this conversation with the Associate Professor at Michael Okpara University of Agriculture in Umudike, Dr. Philip Ntor. Dr. Ntor, good morning and welcome to the program.
Good morning, Ini.
Well, you know, having this conversation alone, Dr. Ntor, is a challenge because we're talking of attracting the youth into the agriculture space, and we're seeing farmers being killed. So, I mean, I don't know what picture that even presents to the youth that we're trying to attract to the agriculture space.
Yeah, it's quite unfortunate that a country that is blessed with enormous agricultural potentials, like about 70 million hectares of land, very conducive for agriculture, where you have two seasonal periods, rainy season and dry season, which is also very good for agriculture. And then you have abundant water resources, both underground and surface. And yet, the country is still complaining of food insecurity. And we have large market size, given our population of over 200 million, which means we don't have to complain about food. We have everything, what it takes. We have a very youthful population that ought to engage in agriculture. But the problem, I should think, is that we still engage in a primitive type of farming. We still engage in crude implements where young people are expected to use knife, to use hoe. There is no all over the world, developed countries, the countries we want to imitate, they no longer use knife, they don't use hoe. Even with the mechanization, the so-called mechanization that we are preaching, the world is even leaving us behind. They're no longer talking about mechanization, but precision farming, where drone is used, where sensor remoting is used, where agriculture have gone high-tech. They are no longer talking about even mechanized that we have not even entered. We are still asking the youth, even in the universities, the students are still encouraged to use knife, to use hoe, to use shovel, to do agriculture. It ought to be a thing of the past. We're supposed to go beyond mechanized to talk about high-tech, like use of drone that I mentioned. So that is the problem. And it's compounded by the insecurity that you have in the Benue and other states that ought to be our food basket. So something ought to be done to expand the scope, to expand the number of people that will engage in agriculture, especially down in the areas where you have security. Like where you have security, like down south, people ought to go into farming. Youth ought to encourage to go into mechanized agriculture. But when everybody wants to do prestigious job. Everyone want to wear tie to go to work, wear clean T-shirt and clean jeans to go to farm. You don't expect somebody who use hand and start to till the soil, will use knife and start to clear the bush. Nobody will expect the son or daughter to go into that type of business. You expect your son to go into something if we can't achieve precision farming, where you use the drone, where you use the remote sensor, where you use other high-tech. At least the minimum we should talk about is mechanized farming, where you can use tractor, where you can use plow, where you can use harrowing and other kind of machines. At least we should reduce the number of manual labor that engage in agriculture. So the problem we have why youth are not engaging is that much attention is not given to mechanized agriculture, precision type of agriculture. We still ask them, like in our university and all the universities, not even our own alone, all the universities, you still see during their practical period, they still ask them to use a knife, to use hoe. I remember many years ago when we did our own practicals, we were trained how to use tractor. But now go to most of these university teaching farms. No tractor, no single functional tractor.
So, Dr. Onto,
So that,
shouldn't we say, I mean, you are in the academics, shouldn't we come back to you? You are training these young people, and it is the training that they get from school that paints the picture of the reality of what's ahead of them. So shouldn't we come back to, people like you and your school to get more equipment so that we can attract more of them into the food production space?
that is what it ought to be. But problem is still remain funding. University, though university can sustain the amount of, can raise the kind of money that is required to go into mechanized or precision agriculture. No university can do it. You know the cost of equipment, you know the cost of drone, you know the cost of all these high tech that are required now. If you travel to good universities, like I did my postgraduate program in Technion Institute of Technology in Israel, government sponsor all these things, where the youth ought to train. What the university can still afford all over the country is only knife and hoe and shovel. Most of them cannot get tractors that is required. So the problem with many universities is funding. If funding is there, I know that they will raise the technology that is required. If you go to our agricultural engineering department, they have done research on how to improve the technology, but where is the funding? So I think the major problem in this aspect is funding.
So what should we do about this, Dr. Onto? Where should we go to? What should we start doing to solve this funding issue?
The funding issue, I have a lot of ideas that I have raised in different platforms, where a situation where that you can ask banks. You see most of these banks, every year they declare more than 1 trillion profit. Many companies, they declare more than 1 trillion companies, all these communication companies. I think the best approach is that let percentage of this, their profit, they declare. Let it be devoted to establish agency that will be charged with the responsibility of establishing small and medium scale agriculture, establishing, assisting universities to fund training of our young people. Without funding, no university can cope with the reality of the moment. No university can do that. So we need funding. All the universities in the country, visit their teaching or demonstration farms, visit their livestock farms, like poultry. You go, virtually all the poultries are empty. You go to their arable crop farms, nothing is happening there. Where you still see students, they use the hoe, they use the knife. Nobody will expect the son or the daughter to engage in such type of agriculture. So funding is required. If university can do what it ought to do to engage more youth into agriculture, even after graduation, assuming even with the kind of training we give them, when they graduate, will you expect them to also go into that crude method of farming? You expect them to use go into mechanized system of farming. That is what is expected. But nobody will be expected after graduation. Then you go and get. Another problem is, even when you graduate, do they have access to credit? Do they have access to finance? Do they have access to land? Do they have access to improve varieties of agricultural inputs? So those are the problems that government ought to formulate policies on how they can handle. Without that, university cannot do much. Without that, even our youth will not want to engage in agriculture. So it requires government and other private sector collaborating with the universities. It's only through that you can now see that more youth will be engaged.
So, talking about collaboration, it would really be nice, because a lot of times we say how there are great ideas in the universities and in the academics, but connecting them to the implementation and the reality is another thing. So, it would be really nice if we could have universities like yours focus on agriculture, for instance, working directly with the Ministry of Agriculture in your state, even if it's not the national one. I think that could bring a lot of progress and, solve some of these challenges?
Most of even the state governments, when you also talk about funding, like I'm the director in charge of agribusiness incubation center, I've written proposals to many state governments within the catchment area, written to so many public sector individuals, written to so many people, but none is showing interest because they think that agriculture does not give quick returns. And as far as I know, agriculture has the highest return on investment. Once all the things that are required are involved, it gives higher returns. But the problem is that no people don't show interest because they feel that the gestation period is so long. So nobody will want to support. We have written proposals to even the state government. They also complain of funding. What is happening in the state ministries? Assuming the state ministries are functioning well, we can also, our youths can collaborate with them and then move into the communities to teach even the rural communities, the rural farmers, on how to engage, include this modern method of farming. But the problem is that funding is the major problem. Until the funding problem is handled, I think we'll still continue to talk about food insecurity. There must be a funding breakthrough before anything reasonable can happen.
What about the issue of, research, quality of seedlings? Those, are they not major factors in agricultural space?
Obviously, there are a lot of research going on. There are good real-world experiments conducted on agriculture. But the problem is that if you conduct the research and get a good result, how will you commercialize it? Because except when you get the report, you find out that it will only end in the university library, end in their archive, where the professor or the lecturer will only use it for promotion. So there is a disconnect between our industry, between our public sector and the research centers. Go to our university, you see a lot of researches conducted with good recommendations. But who are coming to look for the recommendations? Who are tapping from the recommendations made by university professors, made by the research centers? The answer will be nobody. Nobody is interested. So I think our problem is that there is a serious disconnect between our research centers and the people that ought to use product of research.
And you've said that, even in the area of funding, you've reached out to government agencies, maybe like the one in your state, and there hasn't been positive response. So I wonder what else we can do. I guess the last hope is the media now. We just have to keep having these kind of conversations to see if we would be able to break through to, especially the government or even the private sector, to try to get some response and progress.
If you recall, around 1976, there was something that was called the Agricultural Credit Guarantee Loan Scheme, something like that, where a particular percentage of bank profit was devoted into agriculture. You also see some companies were taxed and the money devoted to agriculture. You see even in the third fund, which is the major funding agency for universities, no intervention line is meant for agriculture. You have intervention line for library. You have intervention line for ICT. You have intervention line for building of houses and the rest of them. I think that let a particular percentage of money that is going to third fund be devoted to agriculture so that every year each University of Agriculture will get a particular percentage that will be used for research, used for commercialization of the product of research. And outside that, I think that our students should have a serious, to connect with the NER fund, where scholarship will be given to, full scholarship will be given to those that are studying agriculture. You see that many people have lost interest in studying agriculture because of this crude and primitive method of farming. So many don't have interest. So to bring back the interest, one thing government to do, make the areas tuition free, give those studying it bursary. Once Once they graduate, set up a fund, like I said, Agency for Establishment of Small and Medium Scale Agriculture, where if you study and write good proposal, you'll be given a grant. Just like during Okonjo-Iweala's period, there was a you win. That you win assisted so many people to set up agricultural businesses. You move into rural areas, those that wrote good proposal. I know that some of my students, people I supervised, got that you win, 10 million. And most of them are doing very well. And I don't know what happened to the fund, whether it's still there. But if assuming it's no longer there, government can set up a similar scheme where if you graduate, write a good proposal, then fund will be given to you. And there will be an agency that will supervise it regularly to see how far you are doing. And if you are not, if you have funding, have any difficulty in coping, then they will bring in experts that will guide you. That is the only way we can come out of this our mess. Or that we'll continue to import food from China, import food from Netherlands and other countries. All the countries that made it also started this way. But they didn't joke with their research. They didn't joke with their university, agricultural universities and research centers.
All right, Dr. Philip Nto. Well, so many policies already even in existence at this time for credit for agriculture and all, but I guess it's the carrying out of the credit of the policies. That's another issue. But thank you so much for your time and sharing your suggestion with us this morning. Dr. Philip Nto is Associate Professor at Michael Okpara University of Agriculture in Umudike.